Okay, we are going to get started here with our webinar. I want to thank everyone for joining us. This is TimeSolve's webinar on the 7 ways to increase billable time and probably more importantly, how to implement at your firm. I am really excited to show everyone here some of these fun tips that we've developed over spending close to 20 years working with law firms. My name is Scott Clayson. I am the Director of Marketing at TimeSolve. We are a Minnesota-based company, and we've been providing online billing, timekeeping, project management solutions for law firms since 1999. And I think you're going to find a lot of the tips that we go over today are fairly easy to implement and kind of fall under the category of, oh yeah, you know, why haven't I done that before? So a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. First, congratulations, you all are guinea pigs. I'm using this new webinar software for the very first time, for the very first live webinar, it's called Demio, as you can see from the screen that you're on. So I'm hoping everything goes just fine. I did obviously try to test it out and make sure it's going to be working okay. But if we have a few little technical hiccups, that's my excuse today. Okay, so excuse me. I believe it looks like we've lost the screen sharing already, so that's not good. Let's go back and share my screen again. Okay, so we also do have a chat area off on the right-hand side where you can ask questions as I go through here. I do ask that we save any questions that you might have till near the end. I'm going to ask some questions when we come through some of the things that we'll cover in the webinar. But if you do have some specific questions about some of the tips I'm implementing, I would like to go over them near the end, only because sometimes I've found with doing webinars that oftentimes if you have a question, I'm going to answer it maybe 2 minutes later as part of the presentation. So if you do have some questions, just hold off to the end when we do a kind of a general Q&A session. I anticipate this webinar lasting about 45 minutes or so. Roughly speaking, and I will be sending out a link to everyone who attended here so that you can review the webinar again on your own time. So with that being said, let's get started and talk about our agenda and what we're going to be talking about here. So first of all, a little bit of introduction about who we are, who I am, what we're doing here at TimeSolve, and then we'll talk a little bit about kind of your current frustrations and the current sort of state of tracking time. Why are you even here? What motivated you to attend this webinar? And then we'll look into the methods and the processes to increase your time. This is the meat and potatoes of the webinar, the 7 ways that you can actually, we believe, increase your billable time without really doing a lot of things significantly different at your firm. And then we'll kind of answer some of the questions that obviously arise, or naturally arise when thinking about this. Yeah, but will this work for me and my firm? Every firm is different in their culture and how they run the business part of practicing law. And we'll kind of talk about some of those objections that you might immediately be thinking about and how to overcome them. Then we'll talk about the actual tools that you would need in place to implement the changes that we're talking about today. And for those who do stay for the entire webinar, we have a special deal for you that we'll be offering later. So let's talk a little bit about, who am I, where am I coming from, get to know me a little bit here before we get started. I've been with TimeSolve for just over 2 years now, after spending close to 20 years off and on developing marketing channels in the amateur sports industry. I was working at a really large sports complex just north of the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. But I learned quickly that whether I'm marketing a soccer tournament or legal billing software, a lot of the ways in which we market are very similar. I also was a former high school history teacher, so I love doing these webinars and getting back to sort of my instructional roots, and it's been really fascinating and interesting to learn about how the legal industry manages their businesses, and more specifically, the process and the work to track time and put that time onto a coherent invoice, send out the invoice, and be able to collect payment in a timely fashion. So it's been, I'm a lifelong learner, and it's been really fun being a part of the TimeSolve family here for the last 2+ years. I do love the warm weather, even though I live in Minnesota. I love trying to grill the perfect steak. I think I nailed it last night with my family. Both my wife and my son, who you can see there in that photo, love their steaks rare, and I think I got it just right for them. And that was a recent picture of us when we were in Mexico over the winter time, and wishing we could go back there. So that's a little bit about who I am and where I'm coming from for the webinar today. So TimeSolve itself, as I mentioned at the beginning, we were founded in 1999 by the Thomson Reuters Elite. You might have heard of their Elite division, part of FindLaw, I believe. And it's been held privately now since 2006. And in that time, 17, 18+ years now, our uptime has been near 100% with 0 security breaches. And we've had close to $6 billion billed by our customers using our system. And we really do feel like that the value and the service you get from us as legal billing experts is really second to none when it comes to all the various competitors out there. One of the things that we make sure we do is when we bring in account managers and our support people to work for us, we make sure they come from a legal billing background. So they've actually done the work that they are relating to you as the billing coordinators or the attorneys. And we can really walk the walk and not just talk the talk about legal billing. Okay, so let's get to the kind of heart of this and talk a little bit about what motivated you to join this webinar today. Before I talk about why I think you're here, I'd love to have you use that chat window on your screen and tell me what motivated you to sign up and sit here and listen to me and take an hour out of your time. So take a minute here. This is part of it. I want to see if the chat window is even working with this new software. There should be you should see a chat button up near the upper right-hand side area here where you can click on that. It says chat, and then you could just enter a message and let me know. The message part, you type your message down in the bottom right-hand corner once you open up that chat pane, and let me know what motivated you to join us at the webinar here today. I'll take a minute here and just kind of be quiet and let you guys type away, hopefully. Looks like we have some shy attendees to our webinar. I haven't seen any chats come through. So hopefully that's working okay, and hopefully you all are even hearing me okay. So so let's continue then. If you have some things I'll bring up that kind of resonates with you, you can certainly pop in a chat and we can talk about that. So here's a little bit about again why I think that a lot of people are motivated to download the resource guide we offered on the 7 ways to increase your billable time, and why people attend these webinars. Because let's be honest, tracking time and generating invoices is probably the least fun part of being a lawyer or running a law firm. People went to law school to practice law. That's their passion. Yet, without that essential task of tracking time well, because you're in a professional service industries that bills by the hour. So without that essential task of tracking your time well, sending out your invoices promptly and collecting money, there's no way you can keep your practice going. But it's no fun. I mean, nobody starts themselves in a law firm like, yeah, I can't wait for billing day. That's the most fun day of the month. No, that's probably the day of the month you dread the most when you're, especially if you're a small law firm and you as the attorneys are doing the billing yourselves, and you don't have, you don't have, oh, looks like we lost the screen again. Sorry. There we go. Hopefully it's back up. And you don't have the resources of a billing coordinator or a business manager who's helping you run the practice. So the next kind of reason here there are distractions that come up at your firm. There's too many other non-billable things to get done, especially again, if you're a smaller firm. Not only are you practicing law, but you're also having to do marketing to get more people to, get more clients. Obviously, that's a huge part of it. That's a networking. Got to go to a lot of networking events and try to drum up new business, non-billable things. So there's a lot of distractions to not perhaps capturing all of the billable time possible. And it's not the easiest thing to do, to be honest. I mean, can your firm honestly, raise your right hand and swear in the Bible or whatever? Can you honestly say you're collecting all the billable time possible? It's not an easy thing to do. Clio, who does, provides a large-scale practice management solution, came out with a report about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, and I believe they updated it last year, that for a solo attorney, the amount of billable hours that are actually, happening every day is like 4 hours, like 40% of their day, maybe 30% of the day. I don't remember the exact number, but it was less than 50% of their average day was spent doing actual billable time. And that's a huge problem because time is literally money, here. So how can you increase those billable hours? I mean, you're worried there about, counting the pennies. Like I mentioned before, we've been providing billing and timekeeping software for close to 20 years, and we've talked with hundreds of law firms. And that's how we've come about to develop these 7 best practices to consider to make sure that every hour possible is billed accordingly. So, are you excited? Are you ready? Can you just not wait to see what we have to offer here? Big build up, right? So let's get started. Let's start with tip number 1. And really the rest of the tips that we're going to go through, the other 6, cascade from this first tip. And it seems obvious, but I think I've talked to one law firm that said they actually had a time tracking policy. And it was just 2 days ago. Where we are located here in Minnesota, there was an employment law institute where over 1,000 people attended, HR directors, corporate counsel, and then law firms that deal with employment law. And I talked to one person who, at an old firm she worked at, had a policy on tracking time, and they would get, kind of nastygram emails from the senior partner if they weren't following the policy. But that was the first firm I've ever talked to that actually had a time tracking policy. So if you don't have one, it's time to literally think about time as money for your firm. Let's use the example of you go on a 90-minute lunch. Okay, that might be fine at your firm, but that's also perhaps like a $350 expense. That would probably need partner approval if you treated that time as money, an hour and a half of your time if you, bill at whatever rate. So the answer is to establish a documented time policy, okay? And really the policy should include the next 6 tips, as I mentioned. And I really strongly feel that the simple exercise of writing down a policy can truly change the mentality and the culture of your firm. And we'll talk about a little later that you don't have to start with a 5-page manual on what your time tracking policy is, even if it's just a simple Word document or it's on the back of a napkin that you and the other partners came up with at lunch. At least you have something in place. It's written down and you have it documented, and then it can grow from there. So that would be if you take nothing away from this webinar, but one thing, I would say that's the one thing, is have a policy in place. Whatever it's going to be for your firm that fits, at least have a policy so you know what the expectations are. You know what the expectations are, and more importantly, the associates, the other partners, other attorneys, everyone at that firm who is tracking time, they know the expectations and they know what they need to live up to. And like I said, writing down the policy that changes the mentality and the culture of your firm. So that's that's tip number 1, probably the most important tip. Okay, tip number 2 here. establish a firewall between invoicing and time entry. So you want to make sure that all the billable time that is entered shouldn't happen. This shouldn't be happening at the end of each month when the draft invoices are being created. Billable time checks should be independent of invoicing. Okay, your people who do your invoicing should not be the people entering the time as well. And this is a big culture shift for a lot of firms where the timekeepers themselves, the attorneys themselves, probably track their time in an Excel file, a Word document, maybe they still write it down. They give it to the billing person who then enters the time for them in whatever the current system is. Okay, but you should not have the billing people enter their time. There's reluctance on both sides of this. I know that. I know for a lot of attorneys are somewhat stuck in their ways. I think it's beneath them to actually enter it into the system, but they're writing it down anyway. So if there is a system that makes it just as easy to enter the time right in the system versus writing it down in Excel, what's the difference? They're tracking it somewhere. Let's make sure it's tracked right in the system that's going to generate the invoices. Now, I know the other reluctance, and this is less sort of a less obvious one, is that there are, I think, probably some people who do the time entering, and let's be frank, it's just data entry, but they know, like, hey, look, I'm spending X number of days a month entering time for these associates, and if that goes away, if they start entering their time, am I going to have a job? Are they going to need me? You know, could they eliminate or put me down to part-time because they don't need that me to do that data entry? And to me, the comeback is this would free up somebody from doing the less routine, rote tasks of data entry and allow them to do other things that could benefit the firm even greater. Like, let's use that example of the networking work that a firm has to do to acquire more clients. And maybe you guys have been talking for years about, gosh, we really should be hosting, like once a month, we should be hosting the happy hours for all of our clients and ask them if they bring one of their friends, we'll give them something. I mean, something to do some networking to generate more business, but you never had the time. You had a great idea on networking, but you never had the time. Well, maybe this person who has been doing the data entry of time for years and years, now if they have several days or several hours, let's say a month, free to them, maybe they could be the person to be the event planner and set up, a happy hour that you're going to use as a networking event to acquire more clients. The other thing that establishing that firewall between invoicing and time entry creates is it eliminates that time drag in entering time. I talked to a friend of mine who's an attorney in downtown Minneapolis, and he's at a pretty big firm, like 200 attorneys, I mean, really big firm. And he, again, has to give a time report in an Excel sheet to his assistant once a week. And then she enters that time into the system. But it goes back to that drag then, she's now making entries for things that happened up to a week ago. She gets a Monday morning report. She has to go in and enter time from the previous Monday. Well, things get lost there. Did he really track his time well enough? Did he grab all the time possible? So you need to eliminate that time drag in actually entering the time. Ideally, there should be no time between when the actual work is being done on a billable item and when that time entry is made. So you should also establish a policy where time entries are approved or reviewed each week, as soon as possible. I mean, each week seems reasonable. You could do it every day, but if you have an approval process at your firm where the senior partner approves and reviews invoices, they should never have to question the time on an invoice. So if you have an approval process or hierarchy, you should make sure that time is approved long before it gets placed on an invoice. And in some systems, including TimeSolve, if you have an approval system set up, you cannot place that time entry on a pre-bill or a draft invoice until it's been approved. So it goes back to, there should never be this aha moment at the end of the month where you're trying to scramble and make sure that all the billable time is included because the approving attorney on, June 2nd is looking and saying, no, I know Doug was in court for longer than 4 hours back on May 3rd. I remember he came back like well after lunch. We got to go back and check on that. It's like, no, he would have been able to approve that time and review it maybe 3 days after Doug had been in court, and he maybe had a question about how long he should have billed his time for. So it's the idea that time should be approved long before you're ever even thinking about draft invoices, okay? All right, tip number 3. And this is one that's specifically for the attorneys themselves or the timekeepers, whoever is tracking time at your firm. Enter all time by the end of the day. Yeah, duh. But you'd be surprised about, how many people do not do that. A lot of associates will wait until Friday afternoon at 5 p.m. to calculate their time, for the week. So you end up playing that game of fill in the blanks as they try to get to the 40-hour or 45-hour, whatever, time you've designated they must have entered. So by entering and checking their time at the end of each day, there's no need for that end of the week guessing game. And I really do think that of all the time tracking policies you're going to create, this is probably the most important one you can implement, where the entries are made at the end of every day for that day's work, because that's really going to ensure you're not missing any time. What that also does is things are fresh in people's heads. If it's even like, tomorrow morning and they're entering time from today, they may forget that 10-minute phone call they had this morning at 9 a.m. That is actually billable time. But if they create that time entry right then and there, then they capture that. As soon as the phone rings, if they have the ability to bring up and start a timer, wherever it might be, whether it's as simply as having a timer on your phone, whether it's within your actual software that you use to track time, whatever it is, as long as it's captured and entered right then and at that moment. And I know it's a pain in the butt. Nobody enjoys doing this, but if you have the tools to make it easy to do, then it's more likely to have it happen. Okay. Okay. Before I'm going to back up a little bit. I see somebody did enter a chat here, and I'm just thrilled by that the chat actually works. So they're talking about the reasons why they showed up for the webinar. So thank you for asking that. The reason I'm here is that we've been trying to implement the culture of documenting our time in the firm, but it's been a challenge so far. Sometimes we get so busy in our schedules that we forget to track our time, and that's totally normal, totally understandable. And this goes back to not just, A, having a policy so the expectations are set, and B, making sure you have the right tools to make it easier to track the time, because it's no fun. Nobody wants to necessarily do it. So why should there be any barriers in place to track that time? So I hope you're enjoying things so far, Anna. Thank you for that message. Okay, this is a really interesting tip that I think a lot of people don't think of a lot about, and that is the idea of capturing all of your time, making time entries for everything that you're doing, not just the billable time. And there's a lot of things that can be peeled back if you do that. You can really find the inefficiencies at your firm. And this is one of those areas where you really can count time as money. If the senior partners are able to go back and look at, hey, where is all of our time being spent, they can adjust and shift resources accordingly to maximize efficiency in the use of time. If they see a number of non-billable entries from somebody who's normally charges $350 an hour, but they see that they spent 3 hours on, let's say it's a marketing activity that could have easily be done by somebody else at the firm who doesn't bill by the hour, well, you got to peel back the layers and really see and have those aha moments of, oh my gosh, this person doesn't need to be doing this work. I mean, their time is it's too valuable. They shouldn't be, working on Google ads for us. We should have somebody else doing that because they charge $250 an hour. So it's those inefficiencies, but you wouldn't know that if you were just reviewing billable time entries. So again, goes back to, again, the ease of being able to actually implement and track your time and create time entries. If it's easy to track non-billable entries, then you'll do it. Nobody necessarily loves to do it, but if it becomes an important part of your culture, they will do it. And this goes back to what, as I just said, the last bullet point here. Are the associates handling time that could be done by a non-billable employee? Okay, so and as a solo, are you doing more non-billable tasks because you want to save money? You don't want to hire like an assistant because, oh, they're going to be really expensive. Well, have you done the cost benefit analysis? Maybe the time you make up in having more billable hours will more than cover the cost of bringing in somebody part-time or bringing in a business manager. Maybe it allows you to afford a virtual receptionist service like Ruby Receptionist, or maybe to afford, you could outsource your legal billing. That's one thing TimeSolve offers, where we would do all of the billing work for you. You would just have to track your time. If you eliminated that, you know, let's say it takes you one full day a month to do your billing as a solo attorney, and you decided to have somebody else do that for you, and it costs you, say, $500. Well, shoot, you just gained 8 hours of billable time. You could, I'm sure, you're going to be making more than $500 if you charge, anything what a normal attorney generally charges, anywhere from $150 to, say, $250, $300 an hour, depending on what you're at in your practice. You'll make up what you're paying for that work to be done in 2 or 3 hours of the extra billable time you'll have available to you. Okay, tip number 5 now. Do a review of missing time once a week. So again, before billing and invoicing if that time is missing. I think we've mentioned a couple times now, it's a pretty good idea to separate timekeeping from billing. So the way you do this then is you have somebody, generally it could be a billing coordinator, assign a person who does billing. Their job is to review every Monday any missing time from the previous week. And this means going back and having the ability to quickly and easily review all of the people of your firm. And if you have target billable hours goals set for each week, that person can review and determine how much missing time is there and get on top of that. It could be just as easy as somebody forgot, that tip number 3 of entering all your time, at the end of each day, and they can get back in it and do it. But they wouldn't remember that necessarily if it's a full month later when it's invoicing time that they missed, time on a certain day. So once a week, a review of the missing time from the previous week. And generally once a week is going to be fair enough on that. You don't need to, probably do any more frequently than that. Because you really want, again, the first discrepancy on any time missing shouldn't happen when looking at those draft bills. Can't emphasize that enough. By the time, billing day can really be an easy day if everything through a whole previous month has been done well as far as the time tracking discipline. By the time, if you've approved it, you've seen missing time, you do that once a week report, some of these other things that we're gonna talk about. Once you get to billing, then it's a piece of cake. Nobody needs to really question all of the time entries that are on the bill. They've already been reviewed by people who need to approve it. Those people have already approved it long before it gets placed on the bill itself. So billing really shouldn't take a whole lot of extra time on that day. So tip number 6 is even more extreme to the idea of entering your time every day and doing a review of missing time. And that is close out time entries every week. And this is really a super powerful way to make sure time is entered the day the work is completed. And what that really means is having the ability to lock out timekeepers from entering time from the previous week. So on Monday morning, they literally cannot put time in for anything other than today forward. They cannot go back and try to do a time entry from the week previous. That is an extreme way of making sure that all the time is put in appropriately. Everyone at the firm is going to understand the seriousness of the timekeeping policy if you do something like that, where you actually close out time entries once a week. And that's, again, you could do it every day perhaps, and we'll show you how you can do that within TimeSolve. But the idea that you can't enter time from a certain day that you designate previous. Okay, and our last tip then that we'll go over here is about commission incentives. Create goals for your associates. Last studies that I looked at, it's about 1,600 hours a year that an attorney is required to bill. So you should also look at, if you're paying a commission to your attorneys, you should be paying the timekeepers based on the commission of the funds received, not just the funds that are billed. and this goes back again to having the clarity in your software to be able to see how much have we collected versus how much have we billed. What's our accounts receivable looking like? Okay, so pay them on the commission of the funds received versus what was billed, and you'll see your attorneys be much more proactive in making sure all the billable time is on there. And they'll be proactive in, if your firm does this, of checking to make sure that the bills are getting paid on time. If people know that their paycheck is affected by the time tracking, you would be amazed how well they can become at this task of tracking time. If they know that, if they're not tracking time well and they're not doing the maximum billable hours, they're not going to have really a solid. They're not going to get the paycheck that they could potentially have. So those are the 7 tips that can actually increase your billable time. And as you see, a lot of them, you don't need necessarily specialized or even different billing software. Maybe you do, it depends on what your current system is. And I'm not here to tell you you have to use TimeSolve to accomplish all these things. You can do that using TimeSolve, and I'll show you some examples of that in a little bit. But let's talk about, can this work at your firm? Because you may not be the decision maker at your office when it comes to the policies and the procedures. So what do? And this is, I've learned a lot in my previous life as well, job about, how, if you have something that you think is important that needs to change in your work culture, how do you go about making that change? Because people generally don't like change. Even if they know that the current situation is not great and it's a challenge, the idea of like changing to something new and different is usually scarier than just remaining in the dysfunctional, current period. So identify the stakeholders that are the ones who can really implement the change and get their buy-in. Okay. Use examples of times in that not all time got billed. I'm sure you could come up with some, and use those examples when talking to the stakeholders. Just tell them this: hey, just examining the billable hours versus non-billable hours alone can show us where we need to allocate our resources better. Maybe it's just that simple of a policy change to begin with, is, pick and choose. It doesn't have to be all 7 of these things, but the idea that, we're going to pick one and we're just going to drive home with that one for 3 months. We're going to make all of our timekeepers enter their non-billable entries as well. And then we're going to review how much time is being spent on things that could be spent by other people. Maybe that's what it is. So you can start small and then add to it. Any one of these things, that billable, non-billable, maybe it's just, hey, the policy is you have to enter your time by the end of every day, whatever it might be. And then, make sure the right tools are in place. Most objections will center around this argument. How easy is it for your associates to enter their time? Can you actually close out time entries? How easy is it to get missing time reports, for example? So all of these tips that I gave you really aren't worth much unless you have the right tools to implement them. And most of that does start and end with the right timekeeping and billing software. Here are some things that your billing and timekeeping software should include. And I'm going to go over them here in just, a little more thoroughly here. First of all, mobility. How easy is it for your timekeepers to actually enter their time? So this would overcome any objection that people have to tip number 2, which is to establish a firewall between, the billing people and the timekeepers. It also can help overcome tip number 3 about entering all the time by the end of the day, and number 4 about how to capture all the time, not just billable time. If you have the mobility to do that, then you can overcome those objections. And let me show you an example of that with TimeSolve. So I'm going to log into my TimeSolve dummy account here. And for example, in TimeSolve, when you land here, you land right on the time entry screen itself. So there's no, whoop, sorry about that. Did not mean to go back to that screen. So when you land on, log into TimeSolve, you're right on the time entry screen. You're right ready to do a time entry right now. There's no searching for where to do it. So there's that quickness of it. I can start typing. I know the name of the matter is Wednesday webinar. and there's the matter for it, and I'm going to bill 3 hours, 3.5 hours, and the description, I have my abbreviations I've set up. That's one of the features of TimeSolve. A lot of software has this, and I hit save and new. I just created a time entry in, what was that, 10 seconds here. We also have, and most, especially web-based time billing, they all have mobile apps. So on your phone, again, the phone rings, you're doing an email, and maybe your office desk phone is ringing, and you bring up your mobile app, you just start a timer quickly, and you are up and running, and you can make a time entry. Then you stop the timer, then you associate it with your client and matter. Do that after the fact. In TimeSolve as well, we call it it's a time sync widget that I'm going to open up here real quick. And I know it looks like it was designed a while ago, needs a refresh, but this is a tool that can be used even if you're not online, even if you're not on the internet, if you're on an airplane, if you're at Starbucks and you don't trust their Wi-Fi, so you're not online, but you're still doing some work on the computer, you're writing a brief, whatever it might be. All you need to do is just simply have this up, this widget, and just start the timer. Again, I haven't associated it yet with a client or matter. This is a great thing to have up just in the corner. Again, that sort of thing where the phone rings. You pick up the phone, start a timer. You're on the phone, timer's running. You're having, let's say it's going to be a 15-minute conversation. As soon as it's done, you hit stop. Now you can choose your client and matter. Let's give it a task code. Let's say whatever it might be. You have your descriptions here. You can even use the same abbreviations that you have, normally within the TimeSolve app here. And then I'm just going to save it. And then once I'm back online, or once I have a number of entries saved up, you can sync those over here to TimeSolve. And you're going to notice once I sync them, I come back over to TimeSolve, for example, and if I refresh my screen, there's that additional time entry I just did for 0.1 hours on the phone. So you can do time and expense entries using that time sync tool. So the mobility, and again, whether it's TimeSolve or not, the ease of doing those time entries is the key. In TimeSolve, for example, as you create these entries, you can quickly choose, is this going to be a billable or non-billable? A no charge means it would end up on an invoice, but you're documenting that you're not charging for that work. But more importantly, really easy to capture that billable versus non-billable hours. Okay. So next is flexibility. Does your software have an approver process? Can you get that time entry lockout date? How easy is it to change? And again, this will go towards overcoming the tip number 2 about establishing the firewall. Tip number 5, reviewing missing time once a week. And tip number 6, closing out time entries every week. Let's go back and I'll show you on TimeSolve how that functions here. So to do the approval process, I'm going to log out here. This main account, I'm the admin, I'm the senior partner here. I have access to everybody's information, but I'm going to sign in as just a regular old timekeeper with TimeSolve. I shouldn't say old. An attorney, a regular, somebody who doesn't do the billing or the admin or anything like that. His name is Tony Hill. And we're going to quickly choose a matter that he's been working on. Let's say it's 2 hours. We're going to put in, again, this is the cheat sheet in TimeSolve for the abbreviations that you may have created. So I'm going to do a description. It's a great way of making sure you have uniform language for all of your time entry descriptions. And I'm going to save a new here. Oh, I need a task code up here. I didn't realize that was a required field. And you notice that, in TimeSolve, at least, when you see a list here of your time entries, they're submitted, but it's been submitted for approval. So now they're just sitting out there. They cannot be placed on the draft invoice until they've been approved. So I'm going to log back in as the leader of the firm, the person who goes about approving time entries. And I can go in TimeSolve, go under here to approve time. And this would show me the list of everyone's time I need to approve. Here's 2 time entries from Tony Hill that I need to approve, reject. I can change them. I can change the rate. I can make private comments that only I would see when looking at these time entries. I can make public comments that Tony himself could see on the time entries as to, like, if you decided to reject it, you could put public comments why you're rejecting it. Then when Tony logs into the system, he can see, oh, here's why it was rejected, and it can be updated. And then when you're ready to approve them, you simply check this box and hit save. Now they're all approved and ready to be placed on draft invoices. And when Tony Hill would log back in, he would now see those time entries. Instead of saying submitted, they would say approved. And the approval process, if you have, in TimeSolve at least, you have up to 9 different approval levels you can set up. Now, generally time entries don't have to be run up 9 different flagpoles, but the nice thing about the approval process, at least with the way our system works, is you get notified via email just twice a day if you're an approver that you have time waiting to be approved. So you're not going to get pinged every time somebody has a time entry you have to approve. Your inbox would explode. So just twice a day, you get a reminder email. You have time to approve. You approve that time in a timely fashion, and then it can be placed on the invoice. But you're always reminded that you have time that you need to approve. So it's that flexibility, right? And then the last thing that we talked about was thoroughness. How thorough are some of the reports that you can see? Oh, I'm sorry, I missed a couple of things here. I forgot about the closeout time entries once a week and reviewing missing time. So it's very easy within TimeSolve to, especially if you are the head of you have full admin privileges. I'm looking right over here at a calendar of myself. Scott Laidlaw is the name of the managing partner who has all the admin privileges, and I can see every day, every week how much time I've entered in, and I can see where I might be falling short. I could also see for anybody else in here. Tony Hill is having a weak month. Obviously, I haven't put a lot of time entries under him, but it's an easy way to be able to see how and to track how people are doing on time. But let's talk about that missing, or the how to lock out time. So if you go in TimeSolve, at least you go into time to settings, and you can say lock out any time from, let's say, May 18th backwards. So now you can't put in any time previous to May 18th. And I'll show you what that looks like as a rank and file timekeeper. Now, an admin person will always be able to, if they have admin privileges, enter time. It's the regular timekeeper who doesn't have the full privileges. If I went back as Tony Hill here and I tried to do a time entry from May 16th, oh, it allowed me to. Oh, you know why? I think I have him set as a full admin. Let's try somebody else. I believe I have him set as an admin. That's why. So he can do those time entries too, even with the timeout entry. So let's go. I don't know if I have logins for my other people that I have here. So let's look at his permissions. Yeah, he's an administrator. So he was allowed to do that little devil Tony. Okay, so now I've unchecked the administrative permissions for Tony Hill. And again, I just want to show you guys how this looks, because I think this is kind of slick how you really can lock out your timekeepers so they can't. I'm going to do it for the 16th. They can't enter any time from that day previous. Here's where it's telling me time entries prior to May 18th, 2018 are no longer allowed. So now Tony would have to do that walk of shame down to the billing coordinator or the senior managing partner's office and say, I forgot to put a time entry in on the 18th and you've locked out all of us. We can't enter them. If people understand that they will literally have no access to the system to enter time from some day backwards, like May 18th, and then back in time from there, they'll really learn to understand how to track their time well and do it every day. And then that thoroughness that I talked about, that comes with reporting. In TimeSolve, again, for example, and again, your software, I keep saying again, I need to stop doing that. Your reports should be able or allow you to easily see a window into how much time might be missing for each associates. In TimeSolve, we actually have a specific report called Missing Time. And you can say, okay, daily, we expect hours worked daily to be, we expect 8 hours worth of time entry every day, Monday through Friday. So for Tony Hill, for the week of the 14th through the 18th, let's generate a report for him. We're just going to do him specifically and see how much time has been missing for those 8 hours. You know, and obviously you saw I didn't have time. So he's missing time 8 hours every day. He has a 3-hour time entry on Wednesday, the 16th. That's that one that we put in previously. So you have a missing time report, and it would have all your associates listed here. You could do it as a daily report, or you could also do a weekly report and saying, we expect, you know, the weekly target we're trying to hit is like 40 hours, and you could run the same report. So that reporting element, the ease of being able to see missing time, running these missing time reports, as I mentioned, is one of the tips. Another way within TimeSolve that you can really check on your target billable hours versus what's actually happening is we have a dashboard where you can set up target billable hours. Right now we have it set at 1,600 is our target for the year. So I'm seeing this for the whole year. Then I can see for each month, what are the actual total hours and versus the billable hours. This is a great snapshot into that idea of like who's working on non-billable, how much non-billable hours are getting entered into the system. You'd be able to quickly see that here. Right now, all of my time entries are billable time, not non-billable. So dashboards like this can really help. And as I mentioned before, if you're an administrator, just even looking at each person's calendar here and just switching back and forth from everyone at your firm and quickly taking a look, Mike Hagman's got no time entries in May at all, none in April, none in March. I haven't done much, obviously, time stuff for him as this dummy account. But for me, I'm Scott Laidlaw. Look how much time I've put in, And again, you can see it weekly. You can see the total hours for the month and how much billable, the actual dollar amounts that you're going to be billing for that month. We met with a person at the employment law show the other day who's having a double of time just determining how many hours have I billed for, this month. And we said, well, it's easy. Just come here and just look right there at the hours here and this. So you got to have that thoroughness, right? Okay, and then the other tool is the right policy to implement this change. And that was really, like we said, that was tip number one, was having creating a policy to begin with. So the obvious question then is, what is the right policy for your firm? And the answer is the one that works for you. That's the easy answer. The existence of just writing down your expectations is really, truly the most important thing, and I can't stress that enough. Of just putting anything in place is better than having nothing in place. Start small and build from there. Okay, so in summary, let's go back over these again. Create that documented time tracking policy. Establish that firewall between invoicing and time entry process. This is probably the hardest one to crack for most people because so many attorneys are used to not entering all of their time. They give it to somebody else. Making sure you enter your time by the end of every day. Capturing all of your time, not just the billable time. Review your missing time once a week. Have an ability to track your missing time and see your missing time. Close out time entries every week. That would be if you do 5 and you see that there's a lot of missing time that's being put into place, then it's time to make 6 happen and actually have a closeout date put into place with your software. And then 7 is about the idea of commission incentives, that people will receive commissions based on what is collected versus what is actually billed. Okay, so if you have any questions, please send me an email. There's my email address, scott.clayson@timesolve.com. I am also going to share this slide deck with you right now in the chat. This is the first time I've done this, so I'm thinking it will work okay. So in the chat area, you should see a button now where you can download the 7 ways to increase billable hours. It's our webinar slide deck. So it's these exact slides. that I've just gone over. So they're available for you. And then the one thing I would like to do is have everybody who's still here as kind of a special for attending this webinar. If you're an existing TimeSolve customer, you can email me and the one thing that you learned from this session today, and I'll send you a $10 Starbucks gift card for taking your time to do that. If you're a new customer, somebody who's using some other billing and timekeeping system, if you do sign up for a 30-day free trial, when you do, use the promo code 7ways. And if you eventually become a TimeSolve customer, I'll send you a $100 Amazon gift card if your firm becomes a new customer at TimeSolve. And it's real easy to do. Again, in the chat area, I'm going to put the a link to where you can start a 30-day free trial. Okay, so you just click on that link and you could start your trial today and use that promo code 7ways. You can also just go to timesolve.com and that there's all sorts of kind of orange buttons there where you can start your trial. Okay, so that is going to basically wrap it up for the webinar today. We managed to do it in about 50 minutes or so. So if you have any questions, now is the time to ask them. I'll shut up here for a minute or two and you can think of some questions you might have of what are maybe some of the challenges that you think you'd face at your firm in implementing some of these tips. So take a minute here and think about some questions. All right, nobody's come through just yet with any questions, so hopefully everyone got you know, a good amount of information on really how you can change and get more billable time through some of these policies, and your firm will see the benefits of it. So again, if you have any questions, please send me an email at scott.clayson@timesolve.com. Otherwise, I will send out a link with a recording to this and you can review it with others at your firm if you need to. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. So I need to figure out how I actually turn off this webinar. Okay, so thanks everybody for joining us, and we will hopefully catch up to you. We do these once a month. We offer some other webinars, and if you have any questions, let me know. Thanks everybody, and have a great rest of the week and a great Memorial Day holiday weekend. Bye-bye.